Welcome to the new video of Neurophilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin. When offense becomes a moral badge. We live in a strange moment where sensitivity is often treated like virtue, and taking offense has started to look like a moral act. In many circles, the ability to feel wounded by words is not seen as a weakness, but as proof of depth, awareness, and even righteousness. To be offended is to signal that you care, that you stand for something, that you are on the right side. But beneath that public performance sits a private question that most people avoid. What is actually happening inside the mind of someone who is easily offended? Modern psychology, when placed alongside ancient philosophy, points to something far less flattering than moral strength. Being frequently offended is rarely a sign of high principles. More often, it is a symptom of a fragile identity. It is the mind's way of saying, my sense of self is unstable, so I must protect it at all costs. And the most revealing part is this. The offended person is not just sensitive. They are emotionally outsourced. Their inner stability depends on outer approval. Their peace depends on how others speak, how others behave, how others interpret them, and how others decide to treat them. This is where the Stoic philosopher Epictetus becomes uncomfortably relevant. Epictetus lived as a slave before becoming one of history's most powerful teachers of inner freedom. He understood slavery in two forms. One is physical, chains, ownership, forced labor. The other is psychological, invisible, silent, and often self-imposed. And Epictetus argued that psychological slavery can be crueler than physical slavery because it convinces you that you are free while you are being controlled. This slavery reveals itself in a very specific way. It manifests every time a criticism, a sideways glance, a joke, or a differing opinion is enough to destabilize your emotional state. Not to annoy you, not to challenge you, but to truly shake you. When a simple external stimulus can hijack your mood, your confidence, your clarity, and your self-worth, something important has happened. You have handed control of your mind to someone else. And what makes it even darker is that you did it voluntarily. Epictetus offered a principle that cuts through the drama with surgical precision. It is not events themselves that disturb people, but the judgments they form about those events. This is not a poetic idea. It is a psychological mechanism. A comment is made, a tone is used, a disagreement appears, and then your mind interprets it, it assigns meaning, it decides whether the moment is a threat, whether it is humiliation, whether it is disrespect, whether it is rejection. The disturbance is not the raw event. The disturbance is the story you attach to it. This leads to the crucial point most people resist. Offense is not something that happens to you. It is something you build inside yourself. It requires your cooperation. In fact, offense is a collaboration between an external trigger and an internal interpretation. It is like an invisible contract you sign each time you decide that someone's words or actions are a personal attack. The person may speak. The person may judge. The person may behave poorly. But the moment you internalize it as a statement about your worth, you complete the agreement. You accept the emotional consequence. Once this becomes a pattern, the mind develops what we can call a defensive ego. This is not confidence, it is armor. It is a mental structure that sees the world as a battlefield where honor must be defended at all times. In this mindset, criticism is never just feedback. It is a threat. Disagreement is never just difference. It is conflict. A comment is never just a comment. It is an existential judgment. Life becomes a constant negotiation of dignity, as if every conversation carries the potential to become war. And war is exhausting. When you live as if everything is personal, you cannot relax. You cannot listen neutrally. You cannot learn from confrontation. You cannot tolerate ambiguity. Every social interaction becomes loaded. Every room becomes dangerous. Every tone becomes suspicious. The body stays tense. The mind stays alert. And the heart stays defensive. This is why people who are easily offended often feel drained even after normal interactions. They are not simply talking to people. They are constantly scanning for threats to identity. This is why the Stoic lens is so powerful here. It does not ask you to become cold or indifferent. It asks you to stop giving strangers and opponents unlimited access to your emotional control panel. It asks you to reclaim authorship over your own mind. Because emotional immunity is not apathy, it is freedom. Freedom not to react automatically. Freedom not to depend on approval. Freedom to remain centered even when the world tries to throw you off balance. And when you truly understand the nature of offense, everything begins to change. Words lose their power. Attacks become less personal. Your peace stops being held hostage by the unpredictable behavior of other people. The real question is no longer, why did they say that? The real question becomes, why did I give it permission to enter me? Sensitivity, slavery, and the illusion of virtue. Contemporary society treats sensitivity as if it were an unquestionable virtue. To be easily affected, quickly hurt, or deeply disturbed by words is often praised as a sign of awareness, empathy, and moral refinement. People who describe themselves as highly sensitive are frequently seen as more ethical, more humane, and more emotionally evolved. Sensitivity in this narrative becomes proof of goodness. But the question rarely asked is whether this sensitivity actually reflects depth of character or whether it conceals something far more fragile. When we look more closely, a different pattern begins to emerge. Those who are easily offended are not simply responding to injustice or cruelty. They are reacting to perceived threats against a vulnerable sense of self. Their emotional reactions are less about what is happening and more about what they fear might be revealed. Beneath the surface, offense often functions as a defensive mechanism, protecting an identity that feels unstable and easily shaken. Epictetus observed this dynamic long before modern psychology gave it language. For him, the individual who is easily offended lives in a form of slavery that is subtle yet suffocating. This person is not chained by iron, but by words. They are governed not by laws or masters, but by opinions. Their emotional state rises and falls according to how others treat them, speak to them, or think about them. In this condition, freedom is an illusion. The body may be unrestrained, but the mind is not. What we commonly call sensitivity is often a cognitive trap. It is a way of operating in which emotional control is outsourced to the external world. When someone's words determine how you feel about yourself, you are no longer governing your inner life. You are negotiating it. You are constantly adjusting, reacting, bracing, and recalibrating based on signals from others. In effect, you are telling the world, my peace depends on your behavior. This stance places the individual in a permanent state of vulnerability. Because the world is unpredictable, the sensitive mind becomes hyper-vigilant. Every comment must be evaluated, every tone analyzed, every silence interpreted. The mind begins to live in what feels like a psychological minefield, where any step could trigger an explosion. A neutral remark is perceived as passive aggression. A disagreement is experienced as rejection. A moment of indifference feels like erasure. Over time, this creates chronic defensiveness. The mind is no longer open. It is guarded. It anticipates harm and therefore finds it everywhere. This expectation shapes perception itself. When you expect to be wounded, you interpret the world through that expectation, and the brain, seeking confirmation, obliges. It highlights slights, magnifies ambiguities, and turns uncertainty into threat. The individual is not merely sensitive. They are perpetually braced for injury. This condition is emotionally exhausting. It drains energy because it never allows rest. The mind cannot simply observe. It must constantly judge, defend, and respond. Social interactions become labor rather than connection. Conversations become performances. Listening becomes impossible because every exchange feels like a test of worth. Growth stalls because criticism cannot be received without feeling attacked. Disagreement cannot be explored without triggering defense. Yet perhaps the most concerning aspect of this phenomenon is how it has been misinterpreted as moral strength. In many cultural spaces, outrage is treated as evidence of integrity. To be easily offended is seen as proof that one cares deeply, stands firmly, and refuses to tolerate wrong. But constant indignation is not a sign of virtue. It is a sign of instability. Moral clarity does not require emotional volatility. Ethical strength does not demand perpetual offense. The world, whether we like it or not, is imperfect. People will disagree with you. They will criticize you. They will misunderstand you. They will ignore you. And they will do all of this without asking for permission or offering apologies. Expecting otherwise is not realism. It is fantasy. When your dignity is tied to how others behave, you place your well-being in the hands of forces you cannot control. The result is predictable: frustration, resentment, and chronic dissatisfaction. True freedom begins at a precise moment. It begins when you recognize that offense is not something others inject into you. It is something you allow to take root within you. This realization changes the direction of responsibility. Instead of asking why people are so careless, rude, or unfair, you begin to ask why their behavior has such authority over your inner state. You stop trying to regulate the world and start examining your relationship with it. This shift does not make you passive. It makes you sovereign. You are no longer a subject reacting to external stimuli, but an agent choosing how to interpret them. You stop confusing emotional sensitivity with ethical superiority, and in doing so, you begin to reclaim something far more valuable than approval: inner stability. The dichotomy of control and the illusion of personal attack. At the center of Stoic philosophy lies a distinction so simple that it is often underestimated, yet so powerful that it can dissolve entire structures of psychological suffering. Epictetus called it the dichotomy of control. It is the clear separation between what is truly within our control and what is not. Until this distinction is deeply understood, not just intellectually but emotionally, offense will continue to feel automatic and unavoidable. Epictetus argued that human beings exhaust themselves by trying to control the uncontrollable. We attempt to manage how others see us, how they speak, how they judge, and how they behave. When reality inevitably refuses to cooperate, we experience frustration, anger, and offense. The problem is not that others act unpredictably. The problem is that we mistakenly believe their behavior belongs to us. To understand the dichotomy of control, we must be precise. What is under your control includes your judgments, your interpretations, your thoughts, your decisions, and your actions. These are internal processes. They originate within you. No one can directly force them. What is not under your control includes other people's words, opinions, emotions, attitudes, intentions, and reactions. These exist outside your sphere of authority, no matter how strongly you wish otherwise. Offense arises precisely at the point where this boundary is crossed. When someone speaks critically or dismissively, the sound waves themselves are neutral. They carry no inherent meaning. The emotional charge appears only when your mind assigns a judgment to them. You decide that the words are disrespectful. You decide that they reveal contempt. You decide that they threaten your worth. The disturbance is not caused by the event. It is caused by the interpretation. Epictetus expressed this with unsettling clarity when he said that if something disturbs you, it is not the thing itself, but the judgment you have formed about it. This statement contains a deeply uncomfortable implication. It means that no one can offend you without your participation. For offense to occur, you must actively interpret the external stimulus as a personal attack, accept it as valid, and internalize it. Without these steps, offense cannot take root. An insult is a useful metaphor here. Think of it as a letter delivered to your door. You did not request it. You did not write it. But you still have a choice. You can open it, read it, believe it, and allow it to shape your emotional state. Or you can leave it unopened, recognizing that its contents do not belong to you. Until you open it, it is just paper. The moment you open it, you grant it power. When the dichotomy of control is forgotten, the mind begins to treat everything as personal. A rude comment becomes humiliation. A disagreement becomes betrayal. A critique becomes an attack on identity. But these escalations occur only because the individual has blurred the boundary between what belongs to them and what belongs to others. Other people's opinions are treated as extensions of the self. Their judgments are mistaken for objective truths about one's value. This confusion creates emotional captivity. If your sense of self depends on external opinions, then every interaction becomes risky. You are constantly exposed, constantly evaluating, constantly defending. The mind becomes reactive rather than responsive. It does not pause to assess whether a response is necessary. It reacts automatically, driven by the fear of being diminished. Epictetus insisted that what lies outside your control should be treated as irrelevant in an emotional sense. This does not mean indifference or passivity. It means refusing to grant emotional authority to what you cannot govern. You may hear criticism, but you do not need to absorb it. You may encounter disrespect, but you do not need to internalize it. You remain aware without becoming entangled. This stance requires strength, not withdrawal. Stoic calm is not numbness, it is stability. It is the ability to remain centered even when the environment becomes unstable. You do not control what others say, but you control how you listen. You do not control whether others respect you, but you control whether their lack of respect defines you. This shift alone can radically change how you experience the world. However, even with this understanding, many people notice that the impulse to react does not disappear immediately. The mind still tightens. The emotions still surge. This reveals that knowledge alone is insufficient. Beneath the reaction lies something deeper, a psychological need to defend image, honor, and identity. The dichotomy of control exposes the mechanism of offense, but it does not fully explain why the mind insists on crossing that boundary. Why does criticism feel intolerable? Why does disagreement feel threatening? Why does the ego rush to protect itself even when we know the threat is illusory? To answer these questions, we must look beneath surface reactions and examine the beliefs that quietly sustain them. These beliefs operate in the background, shaping perception without being questioned. They are the invisible architecture of offense. And until they are identified and dismantled, emotional freedom remains incomplete. The three beliefs that sustain offense. Even after understanding the dichotomy of control, many people remain emotionally shaken by criticism, judgment, or disrespect. They may intellectually accept that other people's opinions are outside their control, yet still feel anger, shame, or resentment when confronted. This happens because offense is not sustained by logic alone. It is sustained by deeply rooted beliefs that quietly shape how situations are interpreted. These beliefs operate beneath conscious awareness, yet they exert enormous influence over emotional reactions. Epictetus identified these beliefs with remarkable precision. He understood that offense does not arise randomly. It is supported by a hidden structure of assumptions about worth, image, and entitlement. Until these assumptions are exposed and challenged, the mind will continue to react defensively, even when it knows better. The first belief is this: other people's opinions determine my worth. This idea is one of the most destructive illusions the mind can carry. When you believe that who you are depends on how others see you, you surrender your identity to public judgment. Praise inflates you, criticism diminishes you, approval becomes nourishment, disapproval becomes poison. In this state, your emotional stability is no longer internal. It is negotiated moment by moment through external feedback. Epictetus was clear on this point. Someone else's opinion of you is a reflection of their perception, not a measurement of your essence. When a person criticizes you, they are revealing something about their own values, expectations, and limitations. You are not obligated to accept their judgment as truth, yet offense occurs precisely when you do. The moment you internalize their evaluation, you granted authority over your self-concept. Worth is not democratic. It is not decided by consensus or applause. And every time you take offense, it is because some part of you still believes that others possess the power to define you. This belief keeps the ego permanently exposed, scanning for validation and fearing rejection. The second belief is equally corrosive. I must correct every false perception others have about me. This belief creates a compulsive need to explain, defend, and justify yourself. You feel responsible for managing how you are seen. Any misunderstanding becomes intolerable. Silence feels like defeat. The result is constant self-surveillance and emotional labor. Epictetus warned that the moment you attempt to correct someone's opinion, you have already surrendered power. You have allowed their misunderstanding to disturb your peace. You invest time, energy, and emotion into someone who may not be capable of understanding you or interested in doing so. In trying to defend your image, you become enslaved to it. This belief also traps you in an exhausting loop. Because perceptions are endless and uncontrollable, the task of correcting them never ends. You become a guardian of your reputation, always on duty, always alert. The ego becomes fragile not because it is attacked, but because it is overprotected. The third belief is perhaps the most emotionally charged. People owe me respect. On the surface, this belief seems reasonable. Respect feels like a basic human right. Yet in practice, expecting universal respect is a guarantee of suffering. The world does not operate on moral contracts. People will disrespect you, dismiss you, ignore you, or misunderstand you regardless of how well you behave. When you react with outrage to disrespect, you reveal an unspoken expectation that reality should conform to your standards. Epictetus dismantled this illusion by pointing out that people act according to their own character, not according to your expectations. Their behavior is an expression of who they are, not a verdict on who you are. Believing that respect is owed creates entitlement, and entitlement fuels offense. When expectations are violated, the ego experiences shock and anger. But the violation is not of dignity, it is of an assumption. The world did not break a rule. Your expectations simply collided with reality. These three beliefs work together to construct the mental architecture of offense. When you believe that opinions define worth, that you must manage perceptions, and that respect is owed, offense becomes inevitable. Criticism threatens identity. Misunderstanding demands correction. Disrespect feels intolerable. The ego remains in a constant state of defense. Understanding these beliefs is a crucial step, but awareness alone does not dissolve them. They have been reinforced through habit, culture, and repetition. To weaken them, they must be replaced with practice. Epictetus did not believe in wisdom without training. He treated philosophy as a discipline, not a theory. The mind must be conditioned to tolerate ambiguity, disagreement, and disapproval without collapsing. This requires exercises that gradually build emotional immunity, not avoidance, but exposure, not suppression, but reorientation. Only through deliberate practice can the ego learn that it is safe even when it is not validated. To move beyond offense, the individual must train themselves to stand without external support. This is not arrogance, it is autonomy, and it prepares the ground for the next step in Stoic discipline, developing concrete practices that transform offense into an opportunity for inner strength rather than a trigger for suffering. Fragile identity and the path to inner sovereignty. Beneath nearly every strong reaction to offense, no matter how refined or justified it appears, lies the same hidden structure, a fragile identity. This fragility is not always obvious. It often disguises itself as confidence, moral certainty, or emotional depth. But at its core, it is an ego assembled from borrowed pieces, sustained by external approval, and threatened by rejection. When offense strikes, it is rarely because of the words themselves. It is because those words touch an internal fault line that has existed for a long time. When you are offended, something inside you has been exposed. A comment, a tone, or a disagreement has reached an inner wound that you have spent years trying to protect. That wound is not simply emotional sensitivity. It is the fear that without validation, without agreement, without respect, you may not be solid. Epictetus understood this mechanism with ruthless clarity. He observed that people who are frequently offended possess such an unstable sense of identity that any criticism or disagreement feels like an existential threat. For these individuals, there is no clear separation between an idea and the self. A challenged belief feels like a personal attack. A differing opinion feels like an attempt to erase them. Disrespect feels like annihilation. Because of this, everything becomes personal. And when everything is personal, everything becomes war. The mind remains in a constant state of readiness, always tense, always alert, always interpreting the world as hostile territory. This condition gives rise to what can be called the defensive ego. A defensive ego is not interested in truth, learning, or growth. Its primary goal is protection. It seeks validation rather than understanding. confirmation rather than inquiry, safety rather than reality. It listens not to comprehend, but to shield itself. And when the world fails to provide the validation it seeks, which it inevitably will, this ego responds with resentment, anger, and indignation. Living this way carries an immense psychological cost. To live defensively is to live in a permanent state of conflict. Enormous mental energy is spent managing impressions, controlling narratives, anticipating judgment, and guarding against humiliation. Every interaction becomes a calculation. Every conversation becomes a risk assessment. This effort is not only exhausting, it is futile. The world will not stop disagreeing with you. People will continue to misunderstand you, criticize you, and fail to meet your expectations. This is not a malfunction of reality. This is reality. The moment this truth is fully accepted, something profound shifts. You realize that it is not your task to be understood by everyone, respected by everyone, or approved of by everyone. That mission is endless and impossible. Your task is entirely different. It is to become internally stable enough that misunderstanding no longer destabilizes you. It is to develop an identity that does not require constant reinforcement from the outside world. This is what Epictetus meant by true freedom. Freedom is not the absence of offense. That condition does not exist. Freedom is the presence of an inner structure strong enough that offense cannot penetrate it. It is the construction of an inner fortress, not built from denial or arrogance, but from clarity and self-mastery. The most radical Stoic practice aimed at building this fortress is the deliberate premeditation of offense. Instead of hoping to avoid criticism, the Stoic anticipates it. Instead of praying not to be disrespected, they rehearse it. They mentally place themselves in situations of insult, dismissal, and judgment, and practice responding with calm, silence, and detachment. This is not masochism, it is preparation. By facing the feared scenario in advance, the ego loses its grip. The imagined humiliation does not destroy you. The feared rejection does not erase you. Through repetition, the mind learns that it can survive without approval. This symbolic death of the fragile ego is painful, but it is also liberating. When the need for validation dies, a deeper stability takes its place. To be unoffendable does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means that your dignity is no longer dependent on circumstances. Praise no longer inflates you. Criticism no longer defines you. You become unreachable by manipulation because neither flattery nor insult controls your behavior. Your actions arise from clarity rather than fear, from values rather than reactions. Epictetus lived in physical chains, yet possessed greater freedom than many who walk unbound today. He understood that those who require the world to treat them well in order to be at peace will never be at peace. But those who master their inner responses no longer need protection from the world. They become the protection. When offense no longer governs you, life changes direction. You stop living reactively. You stop negotiating your stability. You reclaim the only territory that truly belongs to you, your consciousness. This is inner sovereignty. And from this place, freedom is no longer something you seek. It is something you embody.